Hello everyone, welcome to the book pod. If you're new here, my name is Senna, and today I'm going to be doing my monthly wrap-up for the month of April. This month I read 9 books. It's a little bit less than last month, or really the lowest out of all the months so far this year. I think last month I read 11 books, and the month before I think I read 13. I think it's the most I've read in a month. So a little bit lower this month. I did have a couple of books that were a little bit longer, so that might have played a part. And also I just don't think I read as much as I normally do. I think I was just a little bit busier this month than usual. But I am really excited to get into these reviews because I had 3 5-star reads this month. And that is just super rare for me. I feel like I don't give out 5 stars extremely often. There's always one little thing that bothers me and makes me not want to give a book 5 stars, but I had 3 really good ones this month. Also super exciting, this month I upgraded my Kindle. I got the newest Kindle Paperwhite. I am super excited about it. I love it so much. I love my pop socket. It's just so cute with the little trees on it. I love this thing. It makes it so much easier to read. The reason why I finally decided to upgrade after using that really old Amazon Fire that my parents gave me that they just had lying around was simply just because its battery just was not lasting very long. I would read for just a little bit and it would start dying, and it also froze a lot too. Not as much when I was reading, but definitely when I was trying to go through the Kindle store. So it was kind of annoying to try and download new books because just navigating the Kindle store was really frustrating. So I decided to trade that one in, and I got 20% off my new Kindle with their trade-in program if I send the old Fire back. So that was honestly amazing. I think with the Kindle itself and all my accessories and everything, it was under $200, which I think is really, really reasonable for how amazing this little device is, and I love it. Okay, book number 1 this month was Come With Me by Ronald Monthy. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name. So this book follows Aaron, whose wife Allison just passed away, and essentially he is looking through their shared closet that they had, and he finds some really odd items, and then he starts digging even further and discovers that she was kind of working on a project. I don't really want to go into further detail without giving anything away because I think it takes a while before it starts to reveal itself, like what she was doing. But he starts revealing some dark secrets that she's had since before they were married, and he wants to try and get to the bottom of what she was doing in the years leading up to her death. I had a feeling this book was going to be a little creepy, but it was seriously, it really did freak me out a little bit. It had almost some like paranormal aspects to it, which I don't know if I was anticipating that or not, but overall, it did kind of creep me out just a little bit. This isn't a horror, this is more of a thriller, but there were just some scenes that did give me goosebumps. Actually, it was really funny because I listened to the audiobook for this book, and there was a scene where the light in their closet was flickering on and off, and he was assuming that it was like the ghost of Allison. She was looking over him or something. And I was in my bathroom getting ready for bed, and my closet light started flickering at the same time. And I literally had to turn it off immediately. It started to freak me out a little bit too much, at least in that moment. So yeah, overall, I do think this book was pretty interesting. I thought it was a really unique concept from my perspective. I will say there were some areas that felt really long, and I was kind of like, okay, like what's happening? Please speed this up a little bit. So there were some areas that I wished weren't so long. I feel like there was a lot of descriptions about what Aaron was feeling and all these creepy vibes that he had. And for me, I think it was just a little excessive, and I think that seems to be the most common complaint on Goodreads as well. Overall though, I did really enjoy the book, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Book number 2 this month was My Dark Vanessa by Katie Elizabeth Russell. This book follows 15-year-old Vanessa, who ends up going to a new school, and she ends up getting into a relationship with her English teacher. That's the simplest way for me to explain the plot, but there are two different timelines that we follow with Vanessa's life. The first timeline is when she's 15 and when this relationship is currently going on. And the second timeline is when she's in her early 30s. And you kind of see how this relationship affected who she became as an adult, how she views relationships, how she copes with her emotions. It's really interesting to see those lifelong impacts that these types of situations have on somebody who is just so young. Also, during that later timeline when she's in her 30s, multiple other women come forward and accuse the same English teacher for sexually assaulting them as well. She's kind of almost a legend at her school. A lot of people speculated whether or not they had a relationship. So one of these women in particular tried to come to her and see if she can come forward as well, because she had the most kind of in-depth relationship with him, and it would be really incredible for their case against him. So she kind of struggles to decide if she wants to come forward. Does she want to put her name out there and talk about what had happened? Does she actually even believe that he did anything wrong? It seems like she's a little bit iffy about how she feels about this whole situation as a whole. I found that to be really interesting. I feel like normally when you look at these types of situations from an outside perspective, as somebody, at least for me personally, who has not been in a situation like this, it's really difficult to see that perspective as far as not just standing up and saying, no, I want him to go to jail. He deserves to go to jail for what he did to me. It's really interesting to see how hesitant she is to even accept that this relationship was wrong in the first place. And that's not normally something that you would assume a victim to believe, I guess. I feel like I would just assume that you'd want to get justice, but obviously there are gray areas. What are you doing, Summer? Hey, show me. Hey, buddy. Wanna say hi? Okay. Hi, baby. Oh, he's coming to say hi. Yeah, he my baby. Oh, okay. I thoroughly enjoyed this book so much. This was my first 5-star read of the month. I definitely recommend it, but I also recommend that you check your trigger warnings, because this can be a really heavy book, especially for people who may be victims of sexual assault. So definitely make sure that you look into that before you give this a go, but I loved this book. My third read of the month was Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. So this book follows Camille. She is a journalist living in Chicago. Her boss comes to her with a groundbreaking story from her hometown called Bin Gap. Summer before, a young girl was killed in her town. Now there's another girl around the same age who is missing. Her boss thinks that she would be the perfect person to go to her hometown and report on this story. This book was honestly insane. I could not believe all the crazy little twists and turns that there were. And there's definitely a giant twist towards the end. Obviously, I don't want to give anything away, but something that I totally wasn't anticipating at all. I actually watched the HBO series that came out a few years ago, and I can't believe I forgot the majority of what happened in this. I kind of briefly remembered little bits and pieces, but I definitely did not remember, who did it, who this murderer was, how the ending wrapped up. I loved the writing in this. I think it was incredibly descriptive. It was also incredibly atmospheric, at least for me. I felt like I was in that town. I loved how you felt like you were in Camille's shoes sometimes. I felt like I could feel what she was feeling in such a deep way. Like, I really connected to her character, and yeah, I really loved that. I do feel like, even though this book is really short, I think it's only like 200 pages or so, yeah, like 250 pages, but it felt like it took me longer than I expected it to take me to read. I think because it was so descriptive, it was harder to just plow through it, if that makes sense. I also feel like there were a lot of words on each page. Like the font was really small, and there was just a lot on each page. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I guess I just was anticipating this to only take a day or two. It took me a little bit longer than that. Otherwise, I loved this plot. It was super intriguing for me. It's so funny because you think you know what's happening and you really do not know what is happening at all. As soon as I finished this book, I went back and rewatched the HBO series, and honestly, that's one of the best film adaptations I think I've seen for a book at this point in time. I think they really did the book justice in the show. It definitely helps that the author was involved in the making of the show. Anyways, I just had to talk about that. Even though this is a video about the book, not the show, I definitely recommend that you do watch the show because it was really well executed. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. My next book of the month was They Never Learn. My next book of the month was They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. This book follows 2 different main characters. The first character is Scarlett. She is a professor at this university. Not only is she a professor though, she's also a killer. She tends to target men who mistreat women. This can include raping other women or being complicit in someone else raping another woman, could be cheating on their spouses, anything like that, and she finds a reason to target them. The other main character's name is Carly. Carly is a freshman at the same university that Scarlett teaches at. She ends up forming a really close relationship with her roommate named Allison. At some point in the book, Allison is sexually assaulted at a party, and Carly is determined to make this man pay for what he did to her. I think I had incredibly high expectations for this book when I got into it. I heard a lot of really great things about it, and I really was excited for a female killer. We don't have as many books about female killers as we do as male killers, so I was just really excited to dig into a book with these unhinged women who were trying to seek justice for these men's crimes. However, I just feel like it fell a little short for me, unfortunately. There's definitely a really big twist in there that you're like, oh, holy shit, I didn't even see that coming. So that was really cool, but I also just feel like, to be honest, I'm having a hard time even remembering a lot about this book as I'm talking about it right now. That's how like not memorable it was for me. I think I was really into it at first, and then as we got closer and closer to the end, it just wasn't as exciting or engaging as we got closer to the end and figuring out, you know, how these 2 characters come together, you know, how these 2 stories come together. It just, I don't know, it really lost its anticipation for me as the book went on. And then the end was just a little underwhelming, I guess you could say, and incredibly unrealistic. It really bothered me, to be honest. I did not enjoy the ending at all, and that's kind of the main reason why I gave it the rating that I gave it, and also because I began to lose interest towards kind of like the last third of the book or so. Overall, I don't think this is a terrible book. I just don't think it was for me. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. My next book this month was His and Hers by Alice Feeney. This book is available on Kindle Unlimited. This book follows both Anna and Jack. Anna is a newsreader. She's asked to cover a case about a woman who was murdered. However, she's a little reluctant to cover this case for some reason. We also have Detective Jack, who is investigating this murder. He happens to know Anna, and he's a little bit suspicious about why she's so reluctant to cover this case. He wonders if she is involved in this crime. To be honest, this was another Alice Feeney book that was a little bit disappointed in. I saw quite a few people talk about how much they loved this book and how it was really addicting and they couldn't put it down. And I just didn't feel that way. There were some parts of the book that I was like, okay, wait, what? What's going on? I did really like that a lot of the chapters were relatively short and easy to read, easy to get through, easy to comprehend and understand. And I did also like that a lot of the chapters ended on big cliffhangers, and it definitely made you want to keep going in some senses. But I could kind of see what people were getting at when they said that. I definitely think that I had an okay time putting it down whenever though, even though there were a lot of cliffhangers at the end of each chapter. I did also like how there were 2 POVs here. Anna's POV as well as Jack's POV. I did like how the story started to unravel. Unfortunately, I feel like the end of this book was very similar to how I felt when I read Sometimes I Lie last month. I just think like it was relatively good throughout most of the book, and then you got to the end and it was just so chaotic. There were so many little twists, one after the other, and I almost felt a little confused at first and a little overwhelmed by everything that was happening. I just don't really enjoy books that continue to throw 50 different twists at you right at the end, just for like shock value almost. I don't enjoy that at all. I want a twist that actually makes sense. 1 or 2 twists, maybe a total, not as many as there were at the end of this one. I will say though that I was not expecting the twist at the end, but still, it was another Alice Feeney book that I was a little disappointed in, and I was planning to read Rock, Paper, Scissors this month as well, but I think I'm gonna take a little bit of a break from her for a bit because 2 in a row, not great books for me. With that being said though, this book has over 4 stars on Goodreads, so it is an unpopular opinion for this book in particular. I just don't think that I enjoyed it as much as some other people. So I ended up giving this book 3 out of 5 stars. My next book for this month was The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. This book is available on Kindle Unlimited. This book follows 2 people who happen to meet at an airport. They're both on the same flight. You have Ted, who is kind of distraught about recently finding out that his wife was cheating on him. And you also have Lily, who listens to him and tries to give him advice about what to do. One of the pieces of advice that she gives him is to plan to murder his wife so she can pay for what she did to him. This book was so interesting. I really loved the concept. Excuse me, could you not look at my books? Thanks. I love how there was Are you contemplating life over there? Are you okay? I loved the deep dive that the author did on a little bit on Ted, but primarily Lily, to get a better idea of her history. There were a couple of twists in here that I was like, holy shit, that was amazing. Some of the best twists that I think I've read in a thriller in a really long time. Not only were they twists that I wasn't expecting, they were also twists that made sense. Those are the 2 things that I enjoy about twists the most. And they make sense with the plot, they're not just for shock value, and also when they're just totally not anticipated at all. I think this author definitely succeeded with that in this book. I do think, if I could say one negative thing, there were some areas that felt slightly long. Not crazy long. There was just a lot of background with the characters. So I definitely think it's a little more of a slow burn thriller. I would definitely still consider it a thriller, but it wasn't as fast-paced as I thought it would be. There were some areas that were fast-paced and then some areas that just were not. So that's the only negative thing that I could say about it, but otherwise, I loved this book so much. I think this is gonna be one of my favorite reads of the year, honestly. I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. This book is available on Kindle Unlimited. This book is gonna be a little bit difficult to talk about, to keep it really brief, because this was based on a true story that took place back in, I think, the 50s or 60s. This follows a boy named David. This is from his POV. He notices that there is a new girl in the neighborhood. Her name is Meg. He's introduced to her. He realizes that her and her younger sister Susan are living next door to him. He has a lot of friends that live in this house next door. Apparently, Meg and Susan are their cousins who came to live with them after a family tragedy. As time goes on, both Meg and Susan are abused by their aunt. Unfortunately, Meg takes kind of the brunt of the abuse, but not only is the aunt participating in this, but so are her cousins as well as some of the other neighborhood kids. And David is left to decide what to do about the situation. Does he want to participate in this even though he knows it's wrong? Does he want to tell somebody about it to get her help? Just an overall very tragic story. Even though this book was based on true events, I do think a lot of the facts were altered in the book. I think that the author was just inspired by this true story and kind of did his own take on it. It's really hard for me to write a book like this because it's based on a true story to an extent. So when I rated this book, I tried to just focus on the writing itself and not necessarily the events that were occurring. I do think this book kept me engaged. It was awful to listen to. I listened to the audiobook on Spotify for part of it, and then I finished it on my Kindle. I can't even imagine the things that this poor girl went through. It was just so incredibly awful. I do think the book was really interesting from the perspective of one of these neighborhood boys and his dilemma and what he should do. I did appreciate that this was told from the perspective of one of the kids that knew that it was wrong and didn't really want to participate in this. However, he still played a role in what happened to her, and I think it was just really sad that more could have been done for her. I feel like that's all I want to elaborate on with this one. It's just hard for me to talk about. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. My next book of the month was The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This book takes place during World War II in France. You follow 2 sisters, Vianne, I think that's how you pronounce her name, and Isabel. Vianne is older and has a daughter, is married, while Isabel is kind of younger and still living with their father. They lost their mother when they were younger because she got sick, and unfortunately this situation kind of broke their family apart to an extent. Their father became an alcoholic because he was trying to cope with his wife's death. Vianne was just so heartbroken. She tried forming her own family, so she got pregnant really young, got married really young. Vianne and Isabel are very different people. Vianne is a little more reserved and tries to play by the rules, while Isabel will rebel against anything that she thinks is wrong. So when the war breaks out, Isabel really wants to do something. She wants to participate, she wants to fight on the front lines with all of the men, while Vianne just wants to protect her family. This story was just chef's kiss. I absolutely love this book so much. I was hoping that my standards were not too high because I did read The Great Alone last month, and 5 out of 5 stars for me. I love that book so much, and I totally understood why Kristen Hanna is such a popular author after reading that one. I'm really happy that I finally gave this one a go. I think the length was just a little intimidating for me, but I thoroughly enjoyed this one. Again, her writing is just so beautiful. You are easily able to connect to these characters, and she knows how to bring the emotions out of you. This is only the, I think, 3rd book ever to make me cry, like tears actually fall from my eyes. So such a good one. It does say that it's supposed to be turned into a movie soon, and oh my gosh, I don't ever go to the theater, but if this came a movie, I would definitely go to the theater for this one because it was just fantastic. I think the story was really unique. Love this take on World War II. I read a lot of historical fiction books that take place during World War II, and this is definitely one of my favorites out of those ones. I just think it was a really cool perspective on the war, for sure. A little bit different than what I had read before. I definitely think this book is just a classic. I think that almost anyone can enjoy this book. I don't think that you need to be a reader of a specific genre to enjoy this book. It was so beautiful. I loved it so much. I'm really excited to read more from Kristen Hanna. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read this month was Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent, I think is how you pronounce her name. This book takes place in Ireland, where you follow Sally Diamond, whose father recently passed away. Sally is thought to have some developmental issues, and ends up putting her father's body in their incinerator after he passes away because he joked about it one time. Once word gets out how she disposed of her father's body, people are very suspicious. Media starts coming around, the police come around to make sure she didn't like murder her father before she put him in the incinerator. Nobody can understand why she did what she did, and she doesn't understand why what she did is so wrong. Her father knew he was passing soon, so he leaves her a series of letters for her to read that basically talk about her past. Sally was adopted when she was around 6 or 7 years old, and she has no memory from before that time. So in these letters, her father kind of explains where she came from, her history, her past. Because she's not really a news watcher, she is unaware of the media attention that she's getting and how people are connecting her to something that happened in her past. It seems like everyone else knows about what happened to her except her herself. When this book started, I had such a hard time putting it down. Well, I guess not listening, because I listened to the audiobook on Spotify. I was super engaged for a good 80 to 85% of the book, could not stop listening to it. I thought it was super interesting. There were some areas that felt kind of slow and I don't know, it didn't really feel like I was reading a novel. It kind of just felt like just reading words on. I don't really know how to explain how I felt at some points. I didn't feel, oh my gosh, this is a story that I'm reading. It just felt like facts on a page. You know what I mean? Kind of bland. So there were some areas that I kind of lost interest. But for the most part, I was engaged with this book for the majority of it. I think Sally Diamond is a very, very original character. She was funny, she made me laugh. The book made me tear up a little bit. There were some unexpected twists in this, which, to be honest, when I started reading, I kind of got the hang of how the book was going. I didn't think there were going to be any crazy twists. It just kind of felt like, okay, we're gonna figure out what happened to her. It wasn't gonna be crazy, you know what I mean? And they actually kind of reveal the majority of what happened to her early on, but there are some other things that get revealed to her later in the book. I think my biggest complaint about this book was the end. I think once it started wrapping up, it was just getting a little boring to me. I also just did not enjoy the end. I don't really like how it wrapped up. It felt somewhat abrupt, I guess. I will say that it feels like some things kind of came full circle, but then there were some other things that I was like, oh man, why did that have to happen? That kind of sucked. So I don't know, that the ending was a little disappointing for me, given how interested I was in the majority of the book. That being said, I definitely still recommend this book. But yeah, it just wasn't my favorite when it came to how everything wrapped up at the end. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you guys being here. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, if you have a different opinion from me. I definitely want to hear your thoughts. You can follow me here on TikTok and Instagram. Please subscribe if you want to see more from me. Thank you so much and happy reading.